It was 11:37 on a Tuesday night in November. My wife slid a laptop across the kitchen table. She tapped a single cell on a spreadsheet.
Thorn. They're gonna try to steal the whole town.
The cell said $14 million. The town was Holcomb Crossing, Oregon, population 220, after we rebuilt it from the ash 4 years earlier. The $14 million was what a man named Mitchell Howell had just offered to buy it for. The actual market value was $34 million. The community land trust value was $18 million. Mitchell was the husband of the HOA president next door. He had spent 8 months bribing 2 of my 5 board members. He planned to flip the whole town within 90 days. He did not know we knew. Sayer poured herself a glass of Pinot Noir. I poured one for myself. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. My name is Hawthorne Bramwell. People mostly call me Thorn. I was 41 years old when this story happened. I had grown up in Holcomb Crossing, Oregon, a small, unincorporated town in the Cascadia foothills, 2 hours southeast of Portland, 3,400 feet up the Santiam Pass. Population, when I left for the Marines in 2003, was 310. Population, when I came back in 2007, was 317. Population, on Labor Day weekend of 2020, was 340. By Labor Day evening of 2020, the population was 0. The Santiam wildfires, what the Forest Service later called the Beachy Creek Complex, were the largest single-county fire event in Oregon history at the time. They killed 11 people. They burned through 193,000 acres. They displaced almost 9,000 residents across 4 counties. They destroyed 89% of Holcomb Crossing structures in 41 hours. The wind shifted at 4 a.m. on Tuesday morning. By 9 a.m., the elementary school was gone. By 11, the post office. By 2 p.m., the general store my grandfather had opened in 1962. By 6, the houses along Holcomb Road. By midnight, almost all of it. 280 residents got out. 60 did not return. I was in Portland that weekend, at the Skanska office where I had worked for 14 years as a senior project manager. My wife Sayer was at home in our condo in the Pearl District with our adopted son, Ren. We watched the satellite images of our hometown burning on a 32-inch flat screen we did not yet realize would be one of the few things we still owned that mattered. My parents got out at 3 a.m. They drove down to Staten. They did not lose their lives. They did lose the house my grandfather had built in 1962. They did lose the general store. They did lose every photograph, every quilt, every saved letter, and the 13-year-old golden retriever they had been promising me they would get a younger backup dog for. That was the worst 3 weeks of my mother's life. It was, at the time, the worst 3 weeks of mine. I learned later that there are worse stretches in life. I learned that lesson the way most people learn it, by surviving the first one and being told by someone older that one would not be the last. In October of 2020, I drove up to Holcomb Crossing with Sayer and a U-Haul I had rented from a Portland self-storage. We walked the streets where the houses had been. We took photographs. We talked to 4 of the 60 residents who had come back. We sat on a concrete foundation pad where my grandfather's store had been and ate sandwiches Sayer had packed from the Pearl District Deli. Sayer said, "Thorn, what do you want to do?" I had been thinking about that question since the satellite images. I said, "Sayer, I want to come home." She did not argue. She is a CPA. She is sharp. She knew, before I did, what coming home was going to require. She also knew, before I did, what coming home was going to be worth. In December of 2020, I resigned from Skanska. Sayer resigned from KPMG. We sold our condo for $612,000. We bought our first burned parcel in Holcomb Crossing on January 7, 2021, for $8,400. By April, we had bought 11 parcels. By the end of 2021, 36. We were not flipping. We were rebuilding. With a plan. The plan had a name. The plan had a legal structure. The plan was called the Holcomb Crossing Community Land Trust. The Community Land Trust was Sayer's idea. She had read about CLTs in a New York Times article in 2019, a piece about Burlington, Vermont's Champlain Housing Trust, which had been operating since 1984 and which had created 2,000 permanently affordable homes by separating the value of the land from the value of the housing on top of it. She had filed the article in her CPA brain. She had never expected to need it. She needed it in October of 2020. A community land trust, for anyone who has never had a reason to know how one works, is a nonprofit that owns land in perpetuity and ground leases that land to residents who own the housing on top of it via a 99-year renewable lease. The lease comes with a deed-restricted resale formula. The land itself never goes back on the market. The housing remains permanently affordable for whoever lives there next. The model is more than 40 years old. The IRS recognizes it under 501c3. Oregon recognizes it under ORS, Chapter 65. Sayer set up Holcomb Crossing Community Land Trust as a 501c3 in February of 2021. She filed the paperwork herself. She paid the $400 IRS filing fee out of our joint checking account. The IRS approved the application in 11 weeks, which is about 7 weeks faster than the average. The auditor on the file later told Sayer it was the cleanest CLT incorporation he had reviewed in his 18 years at the agency. Sayer accepted the compliment with the same flat expression she accepted most compliments. She thanked him. She filed the auditor's note. She moved on. We were the only 2 staff. We worked from a folding table in the back of a single-wide trailer we had bought used for $9,000 and parked on the foundation slab of my grandfather's burned-down store. Our first hire was an architect named Tamsin Brodker. Tamsin was 36, a graduate of the University of Oregon, and had spent 6 years designing modular housing for nonprofit housing developers in Portland. She had been laid off in the early COVID economy. She drove up to our single-wide on a Tuesday morning in March 2021 with a portfolio and a thermos of coffee. Sayer interviewed her. Sayer hired her on the spot. Tamsin moved to Holcomb Crossing 2 weeks later. She lived in a second single-wide we had bought for her at our cost. Our second hire was a carpenter named Mac Eaton. Mac was 61. He had grown up 2 doors down from my grandfather's store. He had moved to Salem in the 80s to work commercial construction. After the fire, he had driven back to Holcomb and parked his truck on the same concrete foundation slab we had ours on. He told me, the day I asked him to be our build supervisor, that he had been waiting 50 years for a reason to come home. I told him I had been waiting 20 for a reason to bring him. By the end of 2021, we had bought 36 parcels and broken ground on the first 11 modular homes. By the end of 2022, we had 51 homes finished and 22 more under construction. By the end of 2023, we had 87 homes, 22 commercial buildings, and a town hall. I will not pretend the work was simple. The Forest Service permitting was complicated. The Oregon DEQ stormwater permits were complicated. The county planning department was helpful, but slow. We made mistakes. Tamsin redesigned the second-generation modular system twice. Sayer recalculated the financial model 4 times. Mac fired and rehired 2 crews. The single-wide trailer office leaked through the winter of 2022, and we had to rebuild the floor in March. We did the work. We did it cheaply. We did it well. We also did not enrich ourselves. Sayer drew an annual salary from the CLT of $76,000. I drew $84,000. Those numbers came in below market for our experience, but they were what the budget could support. We did not take board fees. We did not take consulting fees. We did not bill the CLT for the single-wide trailer, or for any of the equipment we had bought ourselves. We had decided, in February of 2021, when Sayer filed the paperwork, that this was going to be a real nonprofit, not a vanity project, and that there would be a clean audit trail every quarter from day one. There was. There has been. There still is. That detail, in particular, is what made the November discovery hit the way it did. Because everything Sayer had built for 4 years was clean. Every dollar, every receipt, every approval. The part that was not clean stood out in a way it would not have stood out in a sloppier ledger. By the spring of 2024, Holcomb Crossing was a town again. Population 220. 41 of them were original residents who had come home. The post office was open 3 days a week. The general store had reopened under the same name and was being run by my sister Wendy's college friend. The elementary school annex was operating with 31 students. The volunteer fire department had 9 members, and a 1998 pumper truck we had bought used from Lincoln County for $50,000. The fair market resale value of the homes we had built came in at an average of $240,000 per house per Zillow. The Community Land Trust resale price, under the deed-restricted ground lease formula, was $112,000. The difference was the permanent affordability subsidy that made Holcomb Crossing possible. That difference, by Sayer's spreadsheet at the kitchen table, was $20 million. That was the number Mitchell Howell saw. The first warning sign was a Google review. In May of 2024, an anonymous review appeared on the Holcomb Crossing General Store's Google business page. 3 stars. The review said the store had an authentically rural aesthetic that may not be to everyone's taste, and lacks the curated retail experience available in neighboring communities. The reviewer signed off with a single word: Cascadia. Cascadia was Cascadia Vista Estates, the luxury subdivision built in 2010 on a granite ridge above us. 168 homes, average price $720,000. Fire skipped over them in 2020. Property values had been static for 4 years. Property values had been static until we rebuilt next door. The second warning sign was a letter from the Cascadia Vista Estates Homeowners Association, dated June 3, 2024, signed by the HOA president, a 53-year-old retired marketing executive named Gretchen Howell. The letter was 3 pages long. It proposed a community boundary harmonization study between Cascadia Vista Estates and Holcomb Crossing Community Land Trust. It said the study would explore mutually beneficial opportunities for integrated community standards. It said the HOA's preferred outcome was a unified Cascadia Community Master Plan. Sayer read the letter at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening. She set it down. She poured herself a glass of Pinot Noir. Thorn. Yes. They want to annex us. I figured. They cannot annex us. I figured that too. She picked up her phone. She looked up the Lynn County zoning code. She read me the relevant subsection. Then she read me the corresponding section of Oregon Revised Statute, Chapter 65. Then she read me the Holcomb Crossing CLT bylaws. All 3 sources, in different ways, told the same story. A community land trust organized as a 501c3 under Oregon law was not eligible for HOA annexation under any circumstance, period. I drafted a response that night. I sent it through Briar Sutton, our attorney, who polished it down to 4 sentences and sent it on Holcomb Crossing CLT letterhead. The 4 sentences thanked Mrs. Howell for her interest, declined the boundary harmonization study, cited the legal impossibility of HOA annexation of a CLT under ORS 65, and invited any further correspondence to be directed to Mr. Sutton's office. Gretchen Howell did not respond directly. The Cascadia Vista Estates HOA Facebook page posted a long, aggrieved entry about it 3 days later. The post called Holcomb Crossing an experiment in social housing and lamented the lost opportunity for community cooperation. The post received 82 comments. 41 of those were from Cascadia Vista residents. The other 41 were from Holcomb Crossing residents who had not known they were being talked about and who were, by the time the comments started piling up, exhausted of being talked about. Pearl Kingsbury, our board chair, wrote a single-sentence comment on the Cascadia Vista post. "You are not invited." Pearl is 78. She had returned to Holcomb Crossing in February of 2021. She had lost her husband in the fire. She had lost everything. She had bought the first deed-restricted home we built and had moved in on her 75th birthday. She had been on the Holcomb Crossing Community Land Trust Board for 3 years. She did not say much. When she did say something, she said it in 1 sentence, and the sentence was usually correct. Her comment was deleted by Gretchen Howell at 4 a.m. the next morning. Pearl saw the deletion. Pearl sent me a screenshot. I forwarded the screenshot to Sayer. Sayer added it to her growing file. That was June. In August, the offers started. The first offer arrived in our CLT inbox on a Wednesday morning in August. It came from a Portland-based shell company called Pacific Ridge Capital LLC. The email subject line read, Confidential Acquisition Inquiry, Holcomb Crossing CLT Assets. The body was 4 paragraphs of carefully bland real estate language. The bottom line was an offer to acquire all CLT-held assets for $14 million cash, with a 30-day close. Sayer read the email at her desk, in the single-wide trailer that, by August 2024, was actually a real building. We had rebuilt around the trailer in 2022, and the trailer was now the back office of a 2,000-square-foot CLT operations center on Holcomb Road. She forwarded the email to me with a one-word note. Cute. I read it. I did not respond to the email. I forwarded it to Briar Sutton instead. Briar called me 20 minutes later. Thorn. Briar. Pacific Ridge Capital LLC was incorporated in Oregon on March 7, 2024. The registered agent is a Portland law firm called Whitson and Associates. The 2 members of record are Mitchell Howell and a man named Bram Roxborough. No relation to anyone, I checked. Bram Roxborough is a Portland real estate development consultant who has been on Mitchell Howell's payroll for 9 years. Briar. Mitchell is Gretchen's husband. Mitchell is Gretchen's husband, Thorn. Yes. I sat with that for a moment. I said, Briar, what do? We do nothing, Thorn. We let them keep offering. We document everything. We wait. For what? For them to make the second mistake. The second offer came on August 20th. 18 million. Same structure, same shell, same email. The third came on September 4th. 19.5. Same structure. I declined each one with the same 4-sentence response Briar had drafted in June. Holcomb Crossing was not for sale. The community land trust was permanent. The deed-restricted homes belonged to their residents. Future correspondence to Mr. Sutton. By late September, Mitchell stopped sending offers. By early October, Gretchen launched the public campaign. The Cascadia Vista Estates HOA Facebook page began posting weekly content about Holcomb Crossing. The posts were carefully worded. They never named me directly. They never named Sayer directly. They referred to the rebuild operation next door, and the rural redevelopment project, and the experimental community downhill. The posts ran with photographs taken with long lenses from Cascadia Vista's ridge, wide shots of the modular homes Tamsin had designed, the simpler aesthetic of which apparently offended Gretchen Howell's view of what real estate should look like. The posts also began running with charts of Cascadia Vista property values over time, charts of Holcomb Crossing population growth over time, charts of CLT operating costs. The charts had been pulled, I would learn later, from Sayer's quarterly transparency reports, which we had been posting publicly on the CLT website every quarter since 2021, as part of our 501c3 compliance and good faith community engagement. The charts were our charts. Gretchen was using them against us. In October, Pruitt Kessler called me. Pruitt is a journalist at the Albany Democrat-Herald. He is 38, originally from Lebanon, Oregon, and had been covering rural reconstruction stories along the Santiam corridor since 2021. Thorn. Pruitt. I want to write a piece about you. What angle, Pruitt? The angle is, how did one family rebuild a town, and what does it mean for Oregon? The angle is also, what is the HOA next door doing about it? I thought about that for 10 seconds. I said, Pruitt, let me think about it. I will call you back tomorrow. I hung up. I sat at my desk for a long minute. Then I called Sayer at the post office. Sayer. Yes. Pruitt Kessler wants to write a piece. Say yes. You think. Thorn. The light is the cure. The light has always been the cure. Say yes. The Pruitt Kessler article ran in the Albany Democrat-Herald on the 3rd Sunday of October. The headline read, How Holcomb Crossing Came Back. One Marine's Quiet Rebuild. The article was 1,600 words. It was honest. It was accurate. It did not glorify me. It did not glorify Sayer. It did glorify, briefly, Tamsin Brodger's modular design system, and Mac Eaton's carpentry crew, and Pearl Kingsbury's quiet board chairmanship. It mentioned Cascadia Vista Estates one time. The mention was a single paragraph noting that tension has emerged between the rebuilt CLT and the unaffected luxury subdivision on the adjacent Granite Ridge. Pruitt had asked Gretchen for comment. Gretchen had declined. The paragraph also noted, in Pruitt's precise reportorial voice, that Cascadia Vista Estates had recently posted a series of analytical charts about Holcomb Crossing's operating finances on the HOA's social media. The article was picked up by Oregon Public Broadcasting on Wednesday. By Friday, it had run on the OPB website with audio interviews. By the following Wednesday, it had been syndicated by ProPublica's local reporting network. Gretchen Howell, in retaliation, did the thing Briar Sutton had been waiting for her to do. She doubled down. On October 28th, the Cascadia Vista HOA Facebook page posted a long screed about outsiders telling our community's story. The post named me directly for the first time. It used the word narcissist. It used the word carpetbagger. It claimed I had engineered a media campaign to deflect from questions about my management of CLT funds. The post had no evidence. The post had no specific claim. The post was, in legal terms, the kind of public statement that makes a defamation case substantially easier than it would otherwise be. I forwarded the post to Briar. Briar added it to the file. 2 weeks later, in early November, Sayer found the bribery. She was running the quarterly financial reconciliation. It was a Tuesday night. She was at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and the CLT accounting software open on her laptop. She had 3 years of comparative data on screen. She was running ratio checks on every expense category against historical baselines. The travel category caught her eye first. Our CLT had a travel budget of $4,000 a year, allocated for board members attending the National CLT Network Conference and the occasional county zoning meeting in Albany. In 2022, our travel expenses had been $3,700. In 2023, $3,900. In the first 10 months of 2024, our travel expenses were $15,800. Sayer drilled down. 14 of the 15 excess trips had been booked by our treasurer, Lyle Braganza. Lyle was 62, a retired insurance agent, and had been on the board since 2022. The trips had all been to Portland. The expense reports had all listed the purpose as site inspection for proposed CLT collaborations. Sayer drilled down further. She found the consulting payments. Our CLT had no budget for outside consulting. In 2024, our outside consulting category showed $48,000 in payments to a Portland firm called Pacific Ridge Advisory Services. Sayer had not approved a single one of those payments. The approvals had all come, via DocuSign, from our board secretary, Cordelia Pemworth. Cordelia was 58. She was a real estate broker who had moved to Holcomb Crossing in 2022 after the fires. She had joined the board in 2023. Sayer pulled the Oregon Secretary of State filings for Pacific Ridge Advisory Services. The registered agent was Whitson and Associates. The members of record were Mitchell Howell and Bram Roxborough. Sayer sat at the kitchen table for 90 seconds without moving. Then she walked into the living room, where I was reading a Brent Tadarian piece on Twitter about urban planning, and she set the laptop in front of me. She said, "Thorne, they're going to try to steal the whole town." The cell said $14 million. We did not press charges that night. Briar Sutton was at our kitchen table by 7 a.m. the next morning. He had brought 3 sharpened pencils, a leather portfolio, and a single thermos of coffee. He drank Sayer's coffee anyway. Briar is 58. He is a partner at a small Portland firm that handles nonprofit law for about 100 Oregon CLTs and charitable trusts. He has been our attorney since the day Sayer filed the 501c3 paperwork. We walked him through Sayer's findings. He listened for 38 minutes without speaking. He took 4 pages of notes in green ink. When Sayer finished, he said, "Sayer, this is the best documented charity fraud case I have seen in 21 years of practice." She said, "Briar, what's the play?" Briar set down his pencil. "The play is this. Mitchell Howell has been building towards something. The bribery is not the play. The bribery is the funding mechanism for the play. The play is going to be a board action, an attempt to vote on a transaction. They're going to wait for the annual board meeting, which is on December 14th, and they're going to introduce a motion for a strategic partnership or merger or asset transfer with Pacific Ridge Capital. Lyle and Cordelia will vote yes. They will need one more board vote. They have probably been recruiting someone. You'll know who in the next 4 weeks. He took a sip of coffee. Now, here's the question. Do you want to stop them before the board meeting, or do you want to let them do it on tape? Sayer and I looked at each other. We said, at the same time, on tape. Breyer smiled. Then here's the play. We document everything. We do not confront Lyle or Cordelia. We do not change our behavior around them. We do not warn the third board member when we identify them. We let them schedule the motion. We let them introduce the motion at the annual meeting. We let them vote. And then, the moment the vote registers, we crash the meeting with the federal government and the Oregon Attorney General behind us. I said, Breyer, who do I call? He said, Senior Investigator Margie Threlkeld at the Oregon AG's Charitable Activities Division. I have her cell. I will call her this morning. She has been waiting for a case like this for 6 years. Margie Threlkeld came to our kitchen the following Saturday. She was 46, a former prosecutor from Multnomah County, and had moved to charitable enforcement in 2018 because she had grown tired, in her words, of watching nonprofit boards get hollowed out by people who knew how to read 990s but did not believe in the missions. She drank Sayer's coffee. She read the file. She agreed with Breyer's play. She also added 2 things. The first was a federal hook, an assistant U.S. attorney in Portland named Roe Heatherton, who handled 18 U.S.C. 666 cases, federal program theft, applicable to any organization receiving federal funds, which we did via a small Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development grant. The second was a recording requirement. Margie would attend our December 14th annual board meeting in plain clothes, body camera running, with 2 state troopers and a U.S. Marshal staged outside. She asked me if I needed anything else from her. I said, Investigator, I need you to act, for the next 4 weeks, exactly the way you would act if you did not know what they were doing. Can you do that? She smiled. She left. The next 4 weeks were the strangest 4 weeks of my life. I went to work every morning at the CLT Operations Center. I had coffee with Lyle Berganza twice a week, the way I always had. I signed off on Cordelia Pemworth's board secretary reports, the way I always had. I never indicated, by tone or expression or pause, that anything had changed. Sayer did the same. She ran the financials. She greeted Cordelia at the post office with the same small wave she always greeted Cordelia with. She invited Lyle and his wife to our Thanksgiving open house. Lyle declined. He said he and his wife were going to Portland to see their daughter. He was lying. Sayer had quietly checked. His daughter lived in Bend. He went to Portland to meet with Mitchell Howell. The meeting was at the Heathman Hotel on the 3rd floor. We knew this because Margie Threlkeld had a state investigator running surveillance on Mitchell's downtown office. On December 2nd, the 3rd board member was identified. It was a man named Whit Trenholm. Whit was 51. He had been on our CLT board for 1 year. He had moved to Holcomb Crossing in 2023 from Hood River. He had told us, when he joined, that he had retired from a career in commercial real estate to give back to a rebuilding rural community. Whit's bank records, pulled by Margie Threlkeld under a sealed subpoena, showed 3 deposits from Pacific Ridge Capital between October and November 2024. The total was $41,000. Whit Trenholm was the 3rd vote. I did not say anything about this to Whit. I did not change how I treated him. On December 8th, 6 days before the annual meeting, Breyer Sutton sent me a final case file. The file was 287 pages. It contained the bank records, the Pacific Ridge Capital corporate documents, the Pacific Ridge Advisory Services corporate documents, the DocuSign approval audit trail, the CLT travel expense reports, the Gretchen Howell Facebook posts, the Pruitt-Kessler article, the Lyle Heathman Hotel surveillance log, the Whit Trenholm bank records, 3 sworn affidavits from forensic accountants, and Sayer's complete spreadsheet of the financial fraud, color-coded, annotated, indexed. Page 286 was a printed agenda for the December 14th annual meeting, with the proposed new business motion already drafted by Mitchell Howell's attorneys and circulated to Lyle, Cordelia, and Witt. The motion was titled Strategic Partnership and Asset Reorganization with Pacific Ridge Capital, LLC. Page 287 was the meeting protocol Breyer had drafted. The federal warrants had been signed by a magistrate judge in Portland on December 7th. The state warrants had been signed by an Oregon judge in Salem on December 8th. Breyer called me at 4 p.m. that day. Thorne. Breyer. We are ready. Breyer. So are we. I hung up. I drove home. Sayer was at the kitchen table with the December financial report open on her laptop. Wren was at the kitchen counter doing math homework. The wood stove was warm. I sat down across from Sayer. 6 days. 6 days. Are you ready? I have been ready, Thorne. I have been ready since November 4th. She closed the laptop. She poured us 2 glasses of Pinot Noir. The annual meeting of the Holcomb Crossing Community Land Trust was scheduled for Saturday, December 14th at 9 a.m. in the town hall. The town hall is a single-story timber frame building we had rebuilt in 2023. It seats 180 in a single open room with a wood stove in the corner, a small stage at the front, and a kitchen at the back where Caro Yelvinton runs the coffee station every meeting Saturday. The hall has a small American flag, a small Oregon flag, and a wooden plaque above the stage that reads, Holcomb Crossing, Estantley 1894, rebuilt 2023. On the morning of December 14th, the temperature was 27 degrees. There was an inch of fresh snow on the ground, and the kind of low gray Cascadia sky that promised more by afternoon. At 8:45, residents began arriving. By 9, the room held 142 people. Pearl Kingsbury was at the front row chair she had occupied for 3 years. Pastor Trevor Halsworth was beside her. Augie Renfrew was beside him. The rest of the board, Lyle Berganza, Cordelia Pemworth, Whit Trenholm, sat at the small board table on the stage with Sayer and me. In the back row, 3 silent observers. Margie Threlkeld in a gray fleece pullover with a body camera clipped to the inside of her collar. To her right, Roe Heatherton, the assistant U.S. attorney. To Roe's right, Pruitt Kessler with a notebook open on his lap. Outside, 2 state trooper sedans and a U.S. Marshal SUV. I opened the meeting at 9:05. Standard business. Approval of minutes. Treasurer's report. Lyle Berganza read the report Sayer had quietly rewritten Friday night to obscure the discrepancies he was about to be charged with. He read it without flinching. Pearl Kingsbury made a motion to approve. Augie seconded. The motion carried by acclamation. Then we moved to new business. I said, the board has received a request from a member to introduce new business. Treasurer Berganza, would you like to present? Lyle stood up. He smiled. He picked up a folder Mitchell Howell had prepared for him. He read aloud, for the next 9 minutes, the Strategic Partnership and Asset Reorganization with Pacific Ridge Capital LLC proposal. He used words like unlocking value and operational efficiencies and community character. He used the phrase $14 million twice. He finished his presentation. He sat down. I said, before the board considers the motion, Treasurer Pemworth, do you have anything to add? Cordelia stood up. She did. She added a brief endorsement of the proposal. Her endorsement also referenced preliminary due diligence by Pacific Ridge Advisory Services. She sat down. I said, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the proposal. Lyle Berganza moved to approve. Cordelia Pemworth seconded. In the audience, Whit Trenholm stood up, as a member attendee, not as a board member, since only directors voted, and offered 3 minutes of supportive public comment. The vote went to the board. I said, all in favor of the strategic partnership proposal, please indicate. Lyle Berganza raised his hand. Cordelia Pemworth raised her hand. There were 3 votes needed for a majority. Pearl Kingsbury looked at Lyle. She looked at Cordelia. She looked at me. She said in her one-sentence way, we are not selling our town. The room was very quiet. I said, before the vote concludes, may I present some materials to the board? I picked up the leather portfolio Breyer had given me Friday afternoon. I opened it. For the record, the board has just heard a presentation requesting that we sell every CLT-held asset to a Portland LLC for $14 million. The fair market value of those assets is $34 million. The community land trust value, under the deed-restricted ground lease formula, is $18 million. The proposed transaction would dissolve every covenant. It would remove every resident from their permanent affordability protection. I held up page 1. The investor is Pacific Ridge Capital LLC. It was incorporated in Oregon on March 7, 2024. The two members of record are Mitchell Howell and Bram Roxborough. Mitchell Howell is the husband of Gretchen Howell, the president of the Cascadia Vista Estates Homeowners Association. I held up page 17. Pacific Ridge Advisory Services, the consulting firm referenced in Treasurer Pemworth's endorsement of the proposal, was incorporated in Oregon on March 8, 2024. The two members of record are also Mitchell Howell and Bram Roxborough. Our CLT has paid Pacific Ridge Advisory Services $48,000 in consulting fees over the past 10 months. None of those payments were approved by the CFO. All of them were approved, via DocuSign, by Treasurer Pemworth. Cordelia Pemworth's hands started to shake. She set her copy of the proposal on the board table. She did not pick it up again. Lyle, beside her, looked at the back of the room, looked at Whit Trenholm, who was the third vote that was supposed to be there, who had stood up 6 minutes earlier to offer supportive public comment, and who was now sitting in his folding chair staring at the wood stove with the small, unfocused expression of a man doing math in his head about prison sentences. I held up page 41. Treasurer Braganza has booked $15,800 in travel to Portland over the past 10 months. Our authorized travel budget is $4,000 annually. 14 of those trips were to meet with Mitchell Howell, in person, at the Heathman Hotel. Lyle Braganza's face went white. I held up page 83. Member attendee Whit Trenholm, who has just offered 3 minutes of public comment in support of the proposal, has received 3 deposits totaling $41,000 from Pacific Ridge Capital LLC over the past 3 months. Whit, in the audience, did not move. I held up the last page. This presentation, this proposed transaction, and the financial arrangements behind it constitute, in the opinion of our attorney, theft of charity assets under 18 U.S.C. 666, wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. 1343, conspiracy under 18 U.S.C. 371, and breach of fiduciary duty under Oregon Revised Statute 65.357. The federal indictments were signed by a magistrate in Portland on December 7th. The state warrants were signed by an Oregon judge in Salem on December 8th. They are being executed now. I looked at the back row. Margie Threlkeld stood up. She walked the center aisle. Ro Heatherton stood up behind her. Both of them held up identification. Lyle Edmund Braganza, Cordelia Ann Pemworth, Whit Aaron Trenholm. You are under arrest on federal and state charges. You have the right to remain silent. The cuffs went on at 9:43. Outside, at 9:45, Mitchell Howell was arrested at his Portland office. Gretchen Howell was arrested at her Cascadia Vista cabin at 9:47. Bram Roxborough was arrested at his Lake Oswego home at 9:50. The town hall was very quiet for about 90 seconds. Then Pearl Kingsbury stood up. She walked to the front of the room. She turned to face the residents. I move that we permanently expel Lyle Braganza, Cordelia Pemworth, and Whit Trenholm from the Holcomb Crossing Community Land Trust Board. I move that we refer their cases to the federal grand jury. I move that we amend our bylaws to require annual independent forensic audits. I move that we expand the board from 5 to 9 seats. And I move that we name this meeting, retroactively, the most consequential meeting in this town's history. The motion carried 140 to 0. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. The federal grand jury returned a 31-count indictment 11 days later. Mitchell Howell pleaded guilty to 7 counts. He received 7 years federal and was ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution. Gretchen Howell pleaded guilty to 4 counts. She received 4 years federal. Bram Roxborough received 2 years. Lyle Braganza, Cordelia Pemworth, and Whit Trenholm received 18 months, 16 months, and 22 months respectively. The Cascadia Vista Estates HOA was placed under court-ordered receivership for 2 years. A new president was elected the following spring, a retired schoolteacher named Lorelei Wickfield, who had moved into Cascadia Vista in 2014 and who had been quietly waiting for a chance to fix what her HOA had become. Her first action as president was to send Holcomb Crossing a handwritten letter of apology, signed by all 168 households. Her second was to amend the Cascadia Vista covenants to permanently prohibit any future HOA action regarding the Holcomb Crossing CLT. The Holcomb Crossing CLT bylaws were amended in March. The board expanded from 5 to 9 seats. The audit requirements tightened. The asset disposition covenants were strengthened with anti-merger clauses. Briar Sutton drafted with the express purpose of making any future Pacific Ridge-style scheme legally impossible. Sayer and I did not seek re-election to any role beyond our staff positions. We had decided, the night after the December meeting, that the time had come to step out of the day-to-day governance and let the residents who lived in the homes we had built take their place at the table. The decision was not difficult. It was the right decision. It was also the decision Pearl Kingsbury had quietly suggested in the spring of 2024, 6 months before any of this had started, when she had said to me, over coffee at her kitchen table, that the difference between a founder and a steward is the willingness to leave a thing better than you found it, and then to actually leave it. I had not been ready to hear her advice at the time. I was ready by December. Pruitt Kessler wrote the second piece in February. It was longer than the first. ProPublica republished it. Oregon Public Broadcasting did a 30-minute audio documentary. The story ran in the New York Times in April under the headline, One Oregon Town, Rebuilt and Almost Stolen. In May of 2025, the Oregon legislature passed ORS 65.485, the Holcomb Crossing Act, which strengthened community land trust protections against hostile acquisitions statewide. The bill passed the Oregon Senate 28-1 and the House 51-7. The governor signed it on May 14th, on the front porch of our CLT Operations Center, with Pearl Kingsbury and Mac Eaton and Tamsin Brodger standing behind her. Sayer and I were inside making coffee. We had not wanted to be in the photograph. The legislators understood. Cascadia Rebuild Initiative was founded in June of 2025. Sayer became its executive director. I became its chief operating officer. We work pro bono with Wildfire Rebuild community land trusts across the Pacific Northwest. In our first year, we helped 7 communities incorporate. In our second year, 14. By the end of our third year, 22. The communities are mostly in Oregon, but we have started working with 2 in California, one outside Paradise, one outside Coffee Creek, and one in Maui. The model travels. The legal architecture is the same. The patience is the same. The forensic ledger is the same. The wife who runs spreadsheets is, in every case, a different woman, but she is always there, somewhere in the operation, finding the bribery before the bribery becomes a board vote. Ren turned 12 in October of 2025. He had become by then the kind of 11-year-old who could explain a deed-restricted ground lease to an adult without using notes. Sayer is alarmed by this. I am proud of it. We have agreed to disagree. Mac Eaton retired from the build crew in August. He spends his afternoons on the bench in front of the rebuilt general store, drinking coffee, watching the town do its slow, ordinary business. He says he had been waiting 50 years to see Holcomb Crossing busy again. I say I had been waiting 20 years to bring him home. Tamsin Brodger is still on staff. She still redesigns the modular system every other year. She is now, I am told, the most cited modular housing designer in the Pacific Northwest. She does not advertise this. The wood stove in the town hall was lit on a Saturday morning in December 2025, 1 year after the meeting. The room was full. Pearl Kingsbury called the meeting to order. The treasurer's report was clean in the new audited way, with 3 independent forensic accountants having reviewed every line item over the previous month, and with the audit findings posted on the CLT website for any resident to read. The new business was a vote on a community holiday parade for the following Saturday. The motion carried unanimously. Ren, who attended the meeting because he had asked to and because Pearl had told him he could, raised his hand during open comment and made a single suggestion. He proposed that the holiday parade end with a community photograph in front of the town hall, with everyone in the photograph. Pearl said it was an excellent suggestion. The motion to amend the parade plan carried unanimously. Ren turned to Sayer and held out his palm. She slapped it. Pearl made the next motion. The meeting moved on. If a Karen has ever decided your rebuild, your community, or your slow, patient work after a disaster was a thing she could buy at a discount once she saw the numbers, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss next week. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a town hall in December, with 142 residents in folding chairs, watching 3 corrupt board members get arrested in front of the wood stove. Sometimes it looks like a CPA wife at a kitchen table at 11:37 on a Tuesday night, finding the bribery in a single travel expense ratio. Sometimes it looks like a Marine veteran who learned, 20 years earlier in a different desert, that the slow, methodical work is the only work that holds up.
Friends, here's the thing about Gretchen Hallwell. She didn't lose because Thorne Burnwell was meaner than her. She lost because she didn't read the statute. Oregon CLT law is unusual. A community land trust organized as a 501c3 is not eligible for HOA annexation under any circumstance. The deed restricted ground leases are permanent. The governance run with the land. Gretchen did not know any of this. Her husband Mitchell did not know it either. They saw a town that had been rebuilt from ash and they decided the rebuild was a financial opportunity. They forgot that some rebuilds are not financial opportunities. Some rebuilds are people coming home. The strongest neighbors in any community are the ones who have built the legal architecture before the facades. They have the bylaws. They have the IRS letter. They have the attorney who have been working a 501c3 for 21 years. They have the wife who runs spreadsheets that find bribes. Thorne Bromwell did not win because he was angry. He won because Sarah Bromwell was patient with a forensic ledger. If a Karen has ever underestimated your homework, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss next week. Justice is patient, and sometimes it shows up at the town hall in December with a federal government in the back row.